Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge. Oh my goodness, let's not waste any time today. I'm so excited to get into my August wrap up for you guys. Number one, I'm filming this on September 1st and I can't believe that September's here already. August went by so fast, but also I got through so many books and so many projects in August. It was so productive for me. I'm so proud of myself. And part of what I was able to get done in August is the September launch in my Etsy shop. I actually have a Labor Day weekend sale going on right now, so I want to just take just a minute to chat about that real quick. So if you don't know, I do have an Etsy shop where I make a few hand sewn items. I am by no means a super professional, but I think they're really cute and I just enjoy doing things with my hands. So there is 25% off of everything in my shop this weekend through the 4th of September. Just use the code Labor Day. I just had a drop that has these really cute villain sleeves. So I have this in both Kindle and indie size with some Disney villains. There's also some cute spooky stuff. I actually did just pick up a few more fabrics and we'll see if I can add some of those designs before the weekend's out. I don't know, we'll see. I have a lot planned, but there's this cute one here has tarot cards and witchy things on it. And then this one actually glows in the dark. These little ghosts, when you turn off the light, they glow a little bit. So that's super cute. And then I have just some pretty, I always have some fun nature patterns because like those are something I really enjoy in my book sleeves just because they also aren't necessarily tied to like romance, which I mean, I'm totally fine with ones being tied to romance, but you don't know. But anyway, check out the Book Refuge Etsy shop. The link is down below. Use the code Labor Day. It works on your whole order. I do ship to both Canada and all the US currently, so check that out. All right, let us get into what went down in August. So first off, before we get too deep in, I'll kind of talk about some of the highlights and what was happening in August, and then I'll give you my stats for the month, which again, I'm really proud of them. Like honestly, I'm always happy with whatever that I get read, but I'm really proud of this. But this won't actually be a wrap up of every single book that I've read through the month. I'll actually just speak about my favorites of the month. I have 5 favorites that I'll spend a little bit of time on, as well as some honorable mentions that I'm really liking as well. But otherwise, if you want to know in detail about every book that I read, I do weekly wrap-ups, which you might be familiar with if you've been around for a while. So you can check out this playlist here and you can watch more in depth about everything that I read. I read between 10 to 15 books a week, so that's why I do weekly wrap-ups, because what I read in a week is sometimes what people read in a month, if not even longer. So, and I like to talk about everything. That's what I do. It's literally my full-time job now, which I love. So, this month of August was the Romance Readathon, which was put on by Maggie, as well as some other hosts. There was 5 different teams. We don't quite know who the winner is yet. We'll see. But I'm feeling pretty good about Team Seductress. We were ahead for the last 2 weeks, and then there wasn't a way to have your points taken from you in this last week. There was only an opportunity for bonus points, so I'm feeling pretty good because I myself read quite a bit, and if my point totals were correct, because I tried to keep track of just my own points, like just with my own reading, I think I had about 17,000 points. So I'm feeling pretty good. I'm feeling pretty good about it. But it was such a fun experience. And honestly, I know that month-long readathons aren't always the best for people, but I thought that this one was very smart because you got points for anything that you read, basically. You know, whether it was, you know, you got bonus points if it was a romance, but like I read Eldest this month. I'm doing a reread of Aragon, and that book still counted for the page points because you got points for how many pages the book was. And then if it was a romance, if it was a historical romance, and if it had representation with the author, it was worth these different bonus points. So there was lots of opportunity for points still, and I thought that was so clever. And if you were a part of it, you know how much work went into this, but please go check out Maggie's channel. I'll have her link down below. She deserves all the love for what she did. Next year in September is when the next readathon will be, but you know, if you're following me and some other gals in this, there's pretty much something going every month. Like, there's something. I'm not participating in anything in September as of yet. I don't know if anything's getting thrown up, but there will be one in the beginning of October that I'll be a part of. That, well, the announcement video goes up on Tuesday, so definitely be subscribed to see that. All right, so because of this readathon and because like any books that we read would count, it just really kept me reading. It made me kind of less hesitant to pick some stuff up. I mean, I still had quite a few arcs to get through and books that are like required reading for me, because as a booktuber and book reviewer at this point, there's just certain commitments that you make that you're promising to get to. So I don't always have a ton of wiggle room every month, but I also am a pretty high volume reader. So it just really kept me reaching for things. It did lead to kind of, I think, like a lower average in rating than I normally would have in a month, because I did just go for some stuff. I didn't overthink what I was reading. I just dived in. But I don't know. I've always been someone who I'm willing to try anything. I wouldn't even say once. I'm willing to try some things more than once, because I do believe that just because, you know, for an example, a book that I did not like this month had an Omegaverse trope in it, but I am willing to try another one that has Omegaverse in it because I know that, you know, one by a different author might be the one that I need. So it just really kept me reading. And that leads me to my stats after 6 minutes in of just yakking about everything. But this is a catch-up. This is fun. It just lets us chat for a little bit, right? So I read 58 books, which is by far my best month of the year. Now, before I even dive too much deeper into this, I don't ever have a specific amount I'm supposed to hit. I don't get hard on myself, and please don't compare yourself to me. As I've said, I literally am a full-time reader, but even before this, in years past, I've read actually way more books than I've been reading this year, because being a full-time reader and business owner at this point, there's a lot more that I have to do than just go in 9 to 5, be able to listen to audiobooks while I'm at work, come home, and not have admin stuff that I have to do, right? So I've said that. My reading has suffered a bit for it being a full-time thing. But the closest I ever got to 58 was actually January. I read 50. But yeah, I read 58 books this month. And actually none of those were DNFs. A few of these I wish I had DNF'd, but I didn't, because they were worth more points if I finished them, and I just pushed through. But yes, I read 58 books, and this was 19,422 pages, which I'm real proud. That's awesome. The formats of these books was 31 ebooks, 20 audiobooks, 15 physical books, and 9 arcs. That is also double the amount of audiobooks that I've read in previous months, and 100% it's going to be because of how many historicals I read, and you'll see that in just a minute. I've shared this before. Listening to historical books is the #1 way that I like to consume them, and if a historical doesn't have an audiobook, it's a lot less likely I'm going to get to it. It's why historical arcs have been a lot harder for me in recent years, because I would much rather listen to them. I connect better with them that way. But these books were within the following categories. I had 17 contemporary, 21 historical, which, girl, I only read 6 historical last month. So I'm so happy. I'm so glad I read that many historicals. But again, that makes sense because I did make a historical TBR that went alongside my regular TBR to try to help me reach as many as I could. So yeah, there was 10 dark romance, 2 dystopian, 1 erotic, 3 fan fiction, 1 fantasy, 2 paranormal, and 1 non-romance, which of course was Eldest, because I'm rereading the Inheritance Cycle currently. So the star ratings for these books. I did have one 6-star read, although this was a reread. I reread The Bully, so you won't see this 6-star show up in my favorite books because I'm going to go over new books for those. But I did have one 6-star read. There was 11 5-stars, one 4.5 star, 24 4 stars, 11 3.5 stars, 7 3 stars, 1 2.5, and 2 2 stars, which is just, again, I rarely pop below a 3-star for stuff. So yeah, it definitely, some of the quality of stuff wasn't as high as I would have loved, you know, and I would rather be reading more 5-star books, but less books overall. I just am one of those who would, but it was fun for a readathon. And again, I'm happy to, like, I like gamifying things sometimes. It's not how I prefer to do it. Again, that's why I don't, like, I'm never in competition when I'm reading against someone, except when we make it a competition for a readathon, which can be fun. It's fun. And yeah, anyway, enough explaining myself. So yeah, those were the stats of the month. Some of the main tropes that I read kind of stay the same from month to month. You can definitely tell what my favorite things are because we had age gap again, small town, forced proximity, and BDSM were some of the main tropes that I was reading. And those just kind of always show up for me because those are some of my favorite things. So there we go. But all right, let us dive into my favorite things, but we are going to start with some honorable mentions, like I said. So if you follow me on Instagram, you'll know that recently I just binged all the books that are out anyway. There's still a book to come in the Resting Warrior Ranch series by Josie Jade and Janie Crouch. And this is a small town Montana series that involves these retired Navy SEALs who've started a place for those suffering from PTSD, and they provide animal therapy as well as they're connected with a psychiatrist in the area who they kind of like work with her on a lot of this stuff, and I have enjoyed them. I got through all of those books in a week, so I haven't even talked about them individually yet. That will be in this next week's wrap up, so I won't even touch on them because literally I'm filming that video tomorrow and I would have to repeat everything that I'm going to say. But I do currently have a post on my Instagram if you want to go check that out in the meantime. But I found all of these books on Anyplay and I binged all of them, so they deserve an honorable mention, even though none of them like quite make it into like a favorites tier. They were so enjoyable, and I listened to those while I was doing a lot of sewing is how I got through those. So I love that. All right. Also, Their Master by S.M. La Violette. I didn't put this in my top 5 because I have another book by that author that is in my top 5, but this was an anticipated read of mine all the way back in December of last year, and I just never got around to it. Partially because I was sad that it was the last book in the series, and partially because I was nervous that it wouldn't hold up. I don't know why, because S.M. La Violette, like, always lives up to my expectations, but I don't know. I was just nervous because the hero in this book I've really fallen for him through the series, and so I was nervous about how it would go out, and it was going to be a menage, so I was also nervous how that was going to play out. But I did really, really enjoy this, and when I finished reading the book, she said at the end that she will write another one. So I didn't even need to worry about it. There's going to be another one because she really kind of lets her characters take them where she wants them to. And there's a character who kind of popped up in her mind that she wants to give an HEA to. So she's going to do that. So I love it. Love to see it. Okay, so the first book that I want to highlight was Sanctuary with Kings by Catherine Moon. This was a very anticipated release. This book had been pushed back a few times. This is the third and final book in the Tempting Monsters trilogy, which is a Y2/reverse harem, whichever you want to go by for it. In some cases too, like polyamorous as well, as within this one, there is an established MM couple already who they are fated mates to each other, and they have been for many centuries, but they are looking for a female to kind of like complete them. And then we also are introduced to so in this one we have a dragon, a griffin, a minotaur, and a werewolf. There's only 4 in this harem, and I was happy about that because to me, some of them can get quite big. Now, I think Catherine Moon does a pretty good job, and I've said many times she is the only like Why Choose author that I like really, really like. Otherwise, I usually kind of tap out at Minaj with other authors. When there's more than that, it's tough for me to connect. And I've just been let down so many times in the past. But Catherine Moon is someone who honestly first like sparked my love of like, if I was ever going to love Why Choose, it was because of her. And then I just never had any luck finding others that I liked. But anyway, this does wrap up the story of, there is like Brishan, I think his name is, this villain that we've seen throughout the series. And in this, we meet a heroine who, she was a prisoner of this evil like sorcerer being, and she gets rescued in a previous book in this series, which I do also recommend you read The Basilisk of Star Manor, because this directly connects with this book. Like, characters from that book immediately show up in this one, so I recommend you read that novella before you read this book, because it gives a lot of background that you don't get from the other ones. But she's been rescued from that, and she's very traumatized, and she is traumatized as well because this character is a type of fae that feeds off of pleasure, her own pleasure and the pleasure of others, particularly sexual pleasure. And so she is so burned out and broken by the way that she was abused and mistreated by Brishan. But now she's like weak and sick as well, because she doesn't want to feed, like she doesn't want to be around pleasure and sex anymore, because it's only abused her. And I just thought that was such an interesting conundrum we were in. But she's been rescued, and they want to give her peace, they want to give her a break. And so our Minotaur character, he brings her to stay with the Griffin and the Dragon. Sorry, I'm just going by what monsters they are, because I didn't write down all of their names on my paper, and there's too many of them. But this castle is like the dragon and the griffin's home. Like I said, they're mates. And the dragon is actually still in hibernation. Him and this griffin have been mates for many, many years. But the dragon has been in hibernation for a while now. But he's getting close to the time to wake up. And so, yeah, so our heroine gets to go and stay there. And then there's also our werewolf friend, who he pops in and out as well. And they're still trying to find a way to fully defeat Brishan. And there may be a way that our heroine can help with that. So we do get cameos from all of our previous characters, which I loved. And all of them are important in some way for taking Brishan down. So I love that. Of course, there was lots of different kinds of spice in this one. This is a 5 on my chili pepper scale. There is, you know, there is MF, MMF, MMFMM, like just all the stuff mixed together. But it was also really beautiful, and I liked the care that was taken. So yeah, there's a full list of the exact spicy things that happen in this that you can look up, but I recommend it. I gave it 5 stars, and honestly, the whole series was 5-star books for me. But when I look back, this one is my favorite, then the second one, then the first one. I actually like the first one the least when I like look at all of them, but at the time, I gave that 5 stars, and I gave the second one 5 stars, and I gave this one 5 stars. So there we are. I like them all. Whew. All right. Next, I read Poppies and Silk by Tanya Fisher. This was another extremely anticipated book. Like, all of my 5-star books this month were anticipated reads. That's just how it works out. So this one is the sophomore novel by Tanya Fisher. She writes Western historicals, the first one being Letters to Dogwood. Now, in this one, Poppies and Silk, we have Poppy, who is a young widow. Well, not too young. She's not old, but she's in her late 20s, and she has just lost her husband, who is actually kind of a sickly man. He was a very gentle, kind man, but he did have some health issues, both him and his mother, by the way. So our heroine, she was the daughter of a whore, and she'd lived a pretty tough life. And when her mother tried to sell her to pay some of the mother's debts, the heroine runs away, and her mother gets killed that night. This happens in that. And the heroine feels so much guilt for that, because she's like, well, if I had just done what my mother had asked, maybe she'd still be alive. But you can't place that on yourself, you know. And so she ends up getting taken in by this preacher and his family, and this preacher is actually her future father-in-law. So the son is like currently at it's called a sanitarium, but it's really like for his health. It's not like mental health wise, it's like he is a long-term ill, and so it was called like a sanitarium where he was staying. And the mother was sick as well. So she initially gets kind of like taken in by the preacher, and she's helping take care of the mother. And when the son gets better and comes home, her and him have a romance, and they end up being together as well. And now at the beginning of our novel, so that's the prologue, at the beginning of our novel, her husband had died, and now her mother-in-law has died. So it's just her and her father-in-law, and he's actually going to be getting remarried. His wife was sick for a very long time. There's nothing shady about this. His wife was sick for a very long time, and so there hadn't been anything romantic between him and his wife for a long time. And once his wife passes, it's about 6 months later, and he's getting married again. And so they sell their property, and he gives half the money to her, and he takes half the money, and he's going to go marry his new wife. And so he wishes her well, it's all of that, but she doesn't want to go with him. She wants to let him start his new life, and she's going to go. So she has friends in Dogwood. She's actually friends of the heroine from the first one, who she ended up marrying a cowboy, and she lives on a ranch with him and her children and the ranch hands. And there's another friend in this town as well. So she goes to this town, and she is a seamstress, and she makes these very beautiful designs. And her friend is also a seamstress. So they are like going into business together to produce something. So that's where the silk part of Poppies and Silk comes in. And while she's living there, there are some strange happenings in the town. There is a brothel that opened up on the outskirts of town, and there is some scary stuff that's happening with that. So we put that on the back burner. But then we meet our hero, Soul, who works at the ranch where our other heroines live. And he starts meeting Poppy when he comes in to town, and they start courting each other. So this one definitely does have some suspense elements. You know, I didn't reference that brothel and the trouble that it was for no reason, but this was also a achingly sweet romance. It's a beautiful romance between Soul and Poppy, and then that turns quite dangerous when some people try to mess with her. There is someone from her past that she recognizes, and it takes a turn for the worse. But I love this story so much. I think Tanya Fisher does such a good job telling a story, and I highly recommend, if you love like the vibe of an old school historical, but you'd maybe like it to be, you know, a little more for us now, because it has that vibe of like, you know, a Lorraine Heath that was a Western, like that vibe, but it also, you know, it also has like a better connection and more like, I don't know. It's so hard to, because I don't want to say it's like modern style, because it still fits for its time period, but I also think that it reads easier. That's what I'm trying to say, right? So yeah, I gave this 5 stars, and it is a 3 on the spice scale. This is still pretty spicy, but both of hers were. They are like kind of slow to get to it, but both of them were. And Soul is probably going on my book boyfriends list of the year, because the way that he just immediately embraces Poppy, and she's so nervous for him to know her past and like all of this stuff, and he's just like, do you think that would matter when I have you in my arms? Like, do you think I give a shit? Like, I love it, y'all. Okay, Saul is amazing. All right. Then we had another anticipated release, Hideaway Heart by Melanie Harlow. This is the next book in her Cherry Tree Harbor series. Now, I was not a huge fan of Runaway Love. It didn't really work for me, and not just because the cover wasn't as cute as I wanted it to be. I just didn't vibe with that story. It wasn't working for me. Maybe I was burned out on single dads, but I don't quite think so, because I usually like single dads. But anyway, this one is a celebrity and a bodyguard romance. The heroine is a country music star, and she is the sister of the hero from the first book, and he calls in a favor to his friend Xander when his sister is going to take a 2-week vacation at a cabin in kind of the middle of nowhere without a bodyguard. So he's like, hey, I need you to go and show up and like not take no for an answer, because she needs protection. And so Xander agrees to do this favor for his buddy, and he shows up there, and Kelly, she just does not want him to be there. So it starts a little antagonistic, but I wouldn't call this one enemies to lovers. It really was just like, she's really resistant, and he's like, hey, I'm not here to get in your way. but you need protection. It's foolish of you to think otherwise. And when a paparazzi ends up finding out where she is because her dad can't keep his mouth shut about where she went, it turns out being a good thing that Xander is there. This ends up being kind of a fling between them while she's on her vacation, but I thought that it went along really well. Like, these two, they were just fun. This one was fun. I also thought that because she didn't dig her heels in too much about it, and she also listens to him when he asks her to, you know, kind of respect his security, like, plans. And I just really appreciated that about Kelly. I was like, you go, girl. You go, girl. Way to use your brain and not try to be an idiot about stuff. I don't know. I just really appreciated it because I feel like so often heroines go, like, over the top with trying to, like, prove their independence in cases like this, and it just puts everybody in danger when they do that. Yeah, and I also like that I really feel like the spice fit the characters. That is something I've had as a critique lately with some of these small towns, that they have this type of story, but then they throw in a, like, super kinky scenarios that don't always fit the characters. So this one had a little bit of naughtiness in it. It had a little bit of her saying, like, I want to struggle, but still, like, make me do it. So it had a teensy bit of CNC in it, but it wasn't anything, like, over the top, and it wasn't even anything that felt out of place. I don't know, it fit for me. So I ended up really enjoying this one. I liked how the third act conflict played out. And yeah, I gave this one 5 stars. I liked it. So it was 5 stars for me, and it was a 3.5 on the spice scale. All right. Then I read Selena by Minerva Spencer, aka SM La Violette. So this is the other one by her. This one was a highly anticipated read. I have adored all 3 books out in this series so far. Hyacinth is still my favorite, but I gave this one 5 stars as well. This is Selena. This is the pretty, beautiful, elegant sister in the Bellamy family, and she was the one who was supposed to make the match. She hasn't had to make the match because 2 of her other sisters have already gotten married. Now, at the beginning of this one, she finds herself in a bit of a pickle. She is just exhausted with the marriage mart, and she actually has turned down a lot of proposals, and she feels very guilty for that because she knows that her job is to find a partner who can save the family, but she didn't do that. And it turns out it's good because both Phoebe and Hyacinth have gotten married, and she is saved from needing to do that. Okay, she's saved from needing to do that, so brava. But in the beginning, she gets a little bit into a bad situation because she trusts the wrong person, and she ends up being kidnapped and is on her way to Gretna Green. And she's just like, are you kidding me? I made a horrible mistake, but, like, really? And then someone shows up to rescue her, and he doesn't really help much. Like, he doesn't do a great job with the rescue plan, let's just say that. So she ends up saying boo to you guys, both her kidnapper and the one who tried to rescue her. She steals the coats of these 2 men, which has their money and a weapon in it, and books it out of town. She just gets on a stagecoach and starts going wherever it's going. And so she ends up in this small town where there is a butler there who's looking for a housekeeper because his master has just fired another one, and they need a housekeeper. And this is a pretty, like, grand estate, actually, and we'll get into that in a second. And so she decides, this could be a good place to go undercover. I know a little bit about managing a household. Did she, though? Did she? I mean, she did do it for her family, but her family does not have as many servants or as much going on as this, I believe it's a marquis, as this marquis does. But she doesn't know that. So she talks her way into this. She says, oh my gosh, I have a reference from the Duchess of blah, 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 which is now her sister. Although her sister just became this Duchess 2 weeks ago. And no, she didn't work in this household at all. But she's able to kind of BS her way into it, which might have annoyed some people, but it doesn't for me. Because when she gets to this place, this estate is in trouble. And not from financially, but because the master has become neglectful. And his reason for becoming neglectful is that he was in a carriage accident a year ago when he lost his wife and his valet, who was a dear friend of his, and he is blind. Now, he has basically, like, he hasn't fully given up on life, but he's thought about it because he can't do anything. And there was a note at the end of this book I thought was very well put, is that, you know, being blind always puts someone in darkness, just literally physically. But imagine being in this time period where there isn't even like Braille yet really used, and there's not mobility aids or walking aids or someone to help you. Like, you could be put in a sanatorium just because you couldn't see, right? So it's not only just that he is like afraid to ask for help, but he's really feeling sorry for himself, and he has neglected his people to this degree. It's not that the money's not there, it's not that he can't do it, but like, he's not getting through the documents on his desk or all of these things. So things are in a bit of chaos. So when Selena comes into this, she sees that things aren't great, and she's sympathetic to him, but she's also she knows from experience what it's like when a master isn't taking care of his lands. He's not seeing to the tenants' needs. He's not getting construction stuff done. He's not making sure the roads stay good. Like, when he just gives up, like, there's a reason why these dukes and marquis and earls are always so busy, because they have to keep things running. It's a business to be a duke, if you're a good one anyway. It's a business. It's not just about spending money. You are keeping stuff going, and he's not doing that because he's kind of given up. And so she talks her way into this position. She says, I can get you my references, but I want to be doing this. And she really gets on Caius's bad side to start with, because she doesn't give him a lot of leeway. She doesn't listen to his excuses. She really kind of is taking him to task for all these things. And she's like, hey, I will read these things to you. I know a bit, like, I can read good, I can write good. I will read these to you, and we can start answering these. And so that's where we end up getting to. He's still super annoyed with her. And so he's like, I fire you. And she's like, I'm not leaving. And what's cool about this, I know I'm going into a lot of detail, but I love this series. And every time I talk about one of these books and I hold up these hideous covers, I know, I hold up these hideous covers, I feel like I have to sell you on these because I want you to read this series, even if you think this cover is ugly. The books are on KU, okay? The books are on KU. Go read them. Anyway, I love this series so much. So what the cool thing is that she wants to help, and also he can fire her. That's fine. She's really just taking a break from her life because she's tired of having been pimped out to these men. She doesn't need to be a housekeeper. She could go to either of her sisters, who are very wealthy now, or she could go home if she wants. Like, she could do anything. But she decided to do this, and she's going to do a good job. And so when he says, I'm firing you, she's like, give me 30 days. Give me 30 days to help you and your land, and then I'll go. I'll go. Without a reference, I'll leave. Because that's the thing. She doesn't need this job, so if he's really firing her, whatever. So she goes about changing his life. And she absolutely does. Now, where the romance really kicks in with this, because of course there's some romance brewing between them, this, though, is the slowest burn I've read by Minerva Spencer. Across, I think, all the books of hers I read, it is a slow burn. This book went so fast for me, though, I didn't care for that. And also it made sense that it was a slow burn. But it was a slow burn. And what really kicks off the romance is that Caius does have a family member. And this family member will show up, and this family member, he knows something's up as soon as he gets there, because he's like, Selena isn't a 30-year-old housekeeper. She's maybe 20 years old, and she definitely isn't who she said she was. So this is beautiful. It's a bit of a Beauty and the Beast. I think she even has it listed as that in some, like, a Beauty and the Beast love story, because it is like, he was a very handsome man, she's very beautiful, but neither of these people who thought people would love them without their wealth or their money, you know, or their looks or their money, that's totally stripped away with this. So I love it. And honest to goodness, the things that Selena comes up with to expand his world, like simple things of removing all the carpets so he doesn't trip over them, so he can count his steps, finding a way for him to play games again, which I won't spoil for you, are those type of things in a book with a character with a disability that just, it just warms my heart so much. So you could read this as a standalone if you want to, I'll say that. You absolutely could read it as a standalone if you want to read a book with disability rep, or you want to read a Beauty and the Beast retelling, or a slow book, whatever. But I do highly recommend, of course, that you start with Phoebe, because I've given all of these books 5 stars or more. So I highly recommend. But you could just start with Selena if you wanted to. So yeah, that was 5 stars for me. And this was like a 2.5 on the spice scale. Like I said, it's pretty small. And this is a slow burn romance for me. And it was beautifully done. Beautifully done. Very different from their master, which is an erotic novel and is a 5 chili pepper book. All right, my last book I want to talk about in this, and my favorite book of the month. This is the one I ended up giving it my favorite of the month. It was hard to choose because, again, all of these ones are 5-star books, but was Soul of a Witch by Harley LaRue. This was another highly anticipated book. Also a 3rd book in a series, also the finale of a series. This wraps up the Souls trilogy, and man, did I enjoy this book. There is so much detail to go into for this one that I don't quite know how to get into it for a review wise. I would not start with this one. I don't know if anyone will say this is a standalone, whatever. I would not start with this one because this one is about Everly and Callum, and Everly is the daughter of our antagonist in the previous 2 books, okay? She's been like pushed into this role through her life, which I don't want to spoil any of that, but I mean, Everly is a protagonist and she is a hero in my mind. She's a hero, but she comes from the villain, and she is a witch. She has no idea of the full potential of her powers because she's been lied to and kept down by her family all these years. But she is at a breaking point with this story, but it does overlap with both the first 2 books. And I also had someone ask me, like, because a lot of people maybe don't like the first book and they've never continued. I did give the first book 5 stars. I know I'm weird. I gave it 5 stars because the campiness of it was over the moon for me, and I had a great time with that book. Like, I loved it. I loved it a lot. But it really was probably not a 5-star. I loved the second book. I gave that one 5 stars, and I really do. That one was wonderful. And then this one absolutely was a 5 star. So if you read the first book and really didn't like it, maybe try the second book and see. I don't know. But if you I don't know. If you didn't maybe like the hero in that one, maybe try the next 2. I don't know. For me, I don't know. I loved it, so it's tough to do that. But I did have someone ask me, like, should I continue if I didn't like the first book? To me, it depends on why you didn't like it, is the thing. Yeah. Harley LaRue puts so much sexy, fun stuff in her books, but also the stakes were so high in this one. Like, they really were. When it gets laid out for us what's happening. So Everly, like we said, she's really kept down by her father and her stepmother and her siblings and half-siblings. Like, they really are kind of abusive towards her, and we see her put through a lot of that. And she ends up escaping from them, and she discovers this magical house. And she discovers that it's her magic that drew her to this house, because this house belongs to her mother's line, which her mother is dead, because she has a stepmother now. Her mother is dead, and she discovers that her mother didn't like what her father was doing either, because her father was trying to resurrect this old god that they worship, and they were trying to do that, and you had to do it through sacrifices. That's what happens in some of the previous books, is some of those heroines, like, were those sacrifices, or were going to be, right? And they also had a demon under their control, which in the first one, that demon is the one being controlled and breaks away, like that stuff that happens in previous books. So this heroine ends up at this house, which is haunted by her grandmother, actually, which is kind of cool. Her grandmother is haunting it. And there's also a demon staying there named Callum, who has been waiting for her for 2,000 years. So there's actually a prologue of this book of when Callum sees a vision of her. And he knows that she's meant for him. He just needs to wait for her to be born and for her to make his way to him. So he's actually a guardian and protector of her, but he's been waiting in this house for her to get there. And there are some other beings who live in this house too. So as soon as Cal sees her, which, I mean, she's terrified of him. He is a demon. He has wings and claws and a tail and all that good stuff. He is like a feral golden retriever, because he's like, oh, she's here. She's here. This is my woman. This is it. This is it. It's game time. She's here. And she's very just like, it's a demon. He's going to kill me. I'm terrified. And he's just like, she's here. So like I said, very much a feral golden retriever energy coming off of this man, or this demon. And yeah, and then once she's there, she's going to learn about what her mission is and how she can help stop her father and what she'll have to do that, as well as meeting Callum, who, as I said, is her mate, and they have lots of fun, sexy things together, for sure. But I will say, like, Cal was also still the most, like, he was so romantic, even while this was an erotic in a lot of instances. Like, this was 5 chili peppers of spice, for sure. But there was lots of sweet stuff. And this one had, you know, all the staple Harley LaRue kinks in it. This is a very kinky series, right? There is a pegging scene in this one. There's ropes. He can actually create ropes out of, like, shadow. So there's, like, shadow sharabi that happens, which is so hot. There is sex toys. There's piercing in this, because that's happened in the previous books. That is a way that demons, like, claim their mates, is through, like, piercing with metal. So in a previous book, we see that done to the heroine kind of against her consent, not completely, but this one is like they mutually pierce each other. She gets given a clit piercing and he gets given a dick piercing, and it's a pretty hot scene. And of course, because they're magical beings, they're healed immediately and they don't have to wait however long for it to heal. But it's the strangest, like, emotional, hot sex scene ever, because they're claiming each other through this, like, body modification, which was really hot. So anyway, I liked how the finale happened. I like how we end up defeating the evil in it, and it was just, I loved it. And I know that it took Harley a long time to get this book to us, but man, I'm glad that she still did, and that it was still here. And I loved this book, and I hope that this whole trilogy does well, and I can't wait to see what she does next. I don't know what Harley LaRue is doing next. The Losers Duet is out, and this is out. I can't wait to see what's next, so highly recommend. That is going to do it for this August wrap up. Please tell me what your favorite read was, and which of these you're maybe interested in trying. Did you participate in the readathon? Which team were you on? Let me know how it went for you. And yeah, make sure you check out the sale in the shop that is going through the 4th of September. And yeah, we will see you in the next video, friends. Bye.